is the home to so many DACA recipients that we have a conversation about all of the raggedy things that are currently taking place under this administration as it relates to ICE. So you will be allowed to ask questions. Don't know if we'll be able to get to those questions, but I do want to get to the conversation. So just more so look at this as this conversation between a bunch of girl lawyers, and you're having an opportunity to kind of just eavesdrop and see what we're talking about as we're talking about this raggedy administration. So, with that, instead of me trying to introduce people because I hate people introducing me, I'm actually going to allow each of my guests to introduce themselves because I hate it when people read my bios. So, in no particular order, I am looking at one particular attorney. So I'm going to go with her first.
Jasmine, I think you're on mute, but I don't know if you were telling me. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. Okay. My name is Kathleen Martinez, kind of known as Attorney Martinez on Instagram and social media, but I own an Martinez Immigration Global law firm. We do family immigration, removal defense, as well as kind of immigration. So we are located in Texas, but we help people federally with immigration all over the United States. I really, really enjoyed collaborating with other attorneys, especially the absolute queens here. I am just like, I'm so privileged to be able to help people in the next crazy 4 years. So before I begin, I want to give a disclaimer that I say I'm here this evening for informational purposes only. It cannot be construed as giving legal advice. So if you are in need of legal advice, you should, on your behalf, reach out to an attorney.
All right. Whoever wants to jump in next, it's all good.
I'll go next. My name is Angel Mata. I'm a criminal attorney here in Dallas. I've been practicing now for 16 years. Did 5 years as a prosecutor in Dallas and McLennan County, and then I've had my own law practice for 11 years. And I do primarily criminal law with a focus on immigrant clients. And I'm excited to be here to be able to help and inform the community.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cristina Salazar, born and raised in Texas. I have been an attorney for about 12 years. Most of my career, I have worked with victims of domestic violence, specifically undocumented victims of domestic violence. I currently work as immigration attorney for a nonprofit, TMWF, in Collin County, and I'm happy to be here. Again, anything I say is not advice. And that's my disclaimer. But thank you so much, Congresswoman Jasmine, for inviting us out today.
Absolutely. So I am going to kick it off. No one knows where I'm going, so y'all just be ready, but they good. So one of the interesting things that you just said, Attorney Martinez, you said cremigation, I believe is what you called it. And so can you define for us what that is? And then Attorney Mata, I'm coming to you next. I'm sure you knew that was coming. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we immigration lawyers call it crimmigration because a lot of our like clients have criminal history. So what we like to do is we like to obtain green cards for clients and also get them out of removal proceedings. And a lot of that has to do with whether they have a criminal history. So my firm, they're very nerdy and interested in crimmigration because we like to see how we can get the government to forgive their criminal past so that they can get a green card. So immigration is pretty cool because it is very gray, not so black and white when it comes to criminal history. Like more often than not, they can forgive it. So when it comes to forgiving a criminal purpose through a criminal past through like a waiver, it's really cool when you get that forgiven by the government because then you can still get a green card, you can still naturalize, you can still fight your deportation case, basically.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Attorney Mata, you and I spent a lot of time in the same building. That is for sure. And, you know, one of the things that I've been dealing with, I recently had an immigration hearing on the Hill. And in that hearing, there was this deal that I played, which was called Rhetoric or Reality. And I started going on about the things that really are nothing more than rhetoric. And so you talked about dealing with those criminal defendants that happen to be immigrants. And so a lot of people don't understand that there are people that end up with ICE detainers just once they're arrested. As soon as they get arrested, for various reasons, they may end up having a detainer. So either you or anybody else can kind of chime in on kind of like what that looks like. And then also talk about just the general training that just a regular schmegular criminal defense attorney, at least in Texas, has to go through so that they better understand what type of immigration consequences may exist if you plead your client to a certain type of case. And let us know, is it always a felony, or are there some misdemeanor pleas sometimes that people can enter that somehow put them into a status that makes them more likely to be deported?
Yeah, absolutely. And then before I get started, again, this is everything I say is for informational purposes and not here for legal advice. If you need legal advice, obviously, you should get an attorney. So I practice the criminal side of immigration. And so what that means is I have a great deal of clients that are involved in the criminal justice system that also happen to be immigrants. And so what I do as a immigration attorney is coordinate with the immigration attorneys on how to best handle a case. It's really important to have an attorney that either practices criminal and immigration, or a criminal attorney that's going to coordinate a great deal with your immigration attorney. Because what you want to do is try to work out a deal that's best for not just your personal self, trying to get a job or getting out into the community, but also something that's not going to affect your immigration status. So what ends up happening is whenever somebody is arrested, the police agency will send a memo over to ICE, and ICE will determine whether or not to put a hold on that individual. And so what they get is what we call an ICE hold. So what that means is that when somebody has an ICE hold, that whenever they resolve their criminal case, or whenever let's say they bond out on criminal charges, then they're going to be sent over to ICE. So what's really important is while you're fighting your criminal case, that when it's almost resolved, that you then coordinate with an immigration attorney to see whether or not it's going to affect your immigration status. There are some crimes, there are some things that can affect your immigration status that the regular attorney that doesn't practice immigration does not know. So for example, you can get a case dismissed, and it can still affect your immigration status. You can be a first-time offender and enter into a pretrial diversion program, and that can be a conviction for immigration purposes. So what might be a really great deal for a citizen can absolutely have a negative effect for an immigrant. So it's really important to consult with that immigration attorney. Things such as theft, assaults, most felonies, drug charges, and gun offenses are going to be the types of offenses that we see that are going to cause the most problems once they get over to ICE.
Thank you so much. Let's talk about the domestic violence side of this, because I think that and I'm gonna move on to our domestic violence person, just because here's the deal, Attorney Salazar. We recently had legislation that came through the House, and the idea that we were only going to go after those that committed the crime of domestic violence. But the way that the law was written, it actually would impact those that are victims of domestic violence. So I don't know if you want to weigh in on kind of like some of the stories or some of the challenges with dealing with victims of domestic violence, or if Attorney Martinez maybe wants to jump in and talk about kind of that piece of legislation, because I'm sure that she jumped on social media to go off about why it was such a bad deal.
Yes, Congresswoman Jasmine, again, I just want to put my disclaimer out there that none of this is legal advice. Please get an immigration or family law attorney or criminal attorney if you are ever in jail. Now, what's happening, what I have seen with a lot of my clients that I've worked with is a lot of those clients do have criminal charges that are placed on them by the perpetrators of domestic violence, which is usually the spouse. So they could be charged, for instance, with minor assaults. If there's a fight, whoever gets a scratch on their face, right, is the one who ends up accused of the violence. So we have quite a few people, in our facility that have ended up with some misdemeanor charges. And however, we have gotten them successfully relief through the Violence Against Women Act, either through a U visa or through a self-petition, just because of the way the law is written. But we do work closely with the criminal attorneys or the prosecution. We do work closely with our clients to make sure that that prosecutor understands what happened and understands that sometimes, both people or the victims are actually the ones that are that end up in jail and end up in removal proceedings. So I've had to go to immigration court and get quite a few cases terminated because of a criminal charge. Because they were in there because of a criminal charge. And so I think with the new legislation that I'll pass that over to Attorney Martinez. But what we see where I work at our foundation is that a lot of our clients are possibly going to end up in removal proceedings when they're accused of being the perpetrators of domestic violence, because a lot of them end up there. A lot of them end up in jail. But since we are able to talk to the prosecutors, there is no, most of the time, there is no ICE detainer on these women. But we're afraid now that with the passage of the Laken Riley Act, that a lot of our clients will end up with immigration detainers and then will end up in removal proceedings. And that just places a lot of more work on our shoulders. But to go on over to the Laken Riley Act, I'll pass that over to Martinez and Mata.
Yeah, the Laken Riley Act is insane. I actually cannot believe it passed, but I mean, I don't think that we should be shocked by anything at this point. At this point, I'm actually kind of like neutral. I'm like, wow, I'm not surprised at all. But the Laken Riley Act, why it's so crazy is it completely circumvents due process. So you could be accused of a crime, later found not guilty of it, be detained by ICE immediately and deported, which is insane. And so under the Laken Riley Act, I mean, due process is not a thing, but obviously with this administration, constitution is also not a thing and not something to be respected by them. So when it comes to the Laken Riley Act and domestic violence, if you are accused of domestic violence and someone believes it, like a law officer, they could use it to potentially detain you, right? So immigration attorneys have to act a lot faster than we used to because your day in court is no longer something that this administration respects, right? So it's a matter of if you're accused, if you're arrested, we need to get you out on bond. If you're under ICE jurisdiction, then it's going to be a fast process for you. So you're under ICE jurisdiction. If you've been here for less than 2 years, you entered illegally, you have a removal order already, you have a criminal history, including this crap, like you've been arrested but not accused under the Laken Riley Act, right? So you have to know your rights, and you also have to obtain an attorney to get you out of bond because ICE court is very, very fast. Now, if you've been here more than 2 years, you can ask to be released on bond, and then you're out of jurisdiction when it comes to ICE, and then you're put in formal removal proceedings where you have years to fight your case. You're placed in removal proceedings. The crazy thing about this is that Trump just fired 20 immigration judges, right? So that was wild, but it actually works against him because he's just kind of delaying everybody's court. So now that he's doing this, I'm sure a lot of people who might be put in removal proceedings because of this Laken Riley Act might not actually see their day in court until he's no longer president, and maybe we'll have better laws by then. So I think we're just kind of seeing this play out. When it comes to domestic violence, though, on the other side, If you are a victim of domestic violence by an immediate relative, spouse, parent, or child who has status, and you could have gotten a green card through them, but you can't because of the abuse, you can apply through something. You can apply for a green card through something called VAWA. It's a Violence Against Women's Act. So it allows you to adjust status in the United States. So it doesn't necessarily need to be physical abuse, but it can be like financial, psychological, etc. So VAWA is still very much a thing. And if that applies into your situation, definitely contact an attorney.
Yeah, thank you for that. So there's a couple of things left that I want to ask. And then after that, I want to make sure that we kick it over to Kendall, who's going to lay out some of the questions that are being asked right now. But one of the things that I really wanted to point out, and Attorney Mata, add anything if you feel like there's anything that needs to be added. But in a lot of states, such as like Texas, a lot of times the law pretty much says when it comes to domestic violence that if law enforcement is called out and if both people are still there, then a lot of them have a policy that they have to take someone in, especially if the accusations are quite serious. And part of that is supposed to be out of protection, right? But sometimes they just take whoever because they don't know who it is that they believe really perpetrated it. But it is my understanding that that actually may start a process of removal, even if it is a victim, which is why people like, say me, did not vote for this stupid act, even though I surely hate what happened to Laken Riley. But the Republicans have decided to really gas people up by using, say, a victim's name and making people look like they're the devil because a victim is listed on this bill. But the reality is that it's not about what happened to the victim. She wasn't a victim of domestic violence. This was someone that ended up being harmed by somebody she didn't even know. But they decided to do it because they want to make it an emotional thing, if anybody knows the story. And they're counting on people not looking into the minutia. But as an elected representative on the federal level, it is my job to understand how this bill will impact real people's lives. And I don't see how this won't be disastrous, especially since we've already discussed that if someone, say, has an ICE detainer because they've maybe left the country, or not left the country, but been kicked out of the country before, and then they re-entered, then they most likely are going to have an ICE detainer as soon as they go into custody. If they have committed a crime and been found guilty, let me not just say committed, but committed and found guilty under old law of one of those crimes, and then the court decided that it was time to remove them again, but then they came back. They also face additional charges. They also are put into a situation where they have an automatic ICE detainer that most likely will be put on them. And I think people confuse like a sanctuary city for whether or not the ICE detainers go on people. So a couple of things that I want to add, I'm actually just going to add, I'm going to throw these out, whoever wants to answer. Number one, I want to know, what does it mean to say that a city or a state or a county is a sanctuary place? Number one. Number two, the other question that I want to ask is basically, what should someone know if ICE comes and knocks on their door? Should they open the door? Should they not open the door? Are they required to open the door? What types of documentation do you think someone should be looking for if they show up at their door? So these are some of my questions, and answer them in any order that any of you see fit.
If I may speak to the domestic violence, and then I'll hand it over to Christina or Attorney Martinez for the immigration part. In terms of domestic violence, you're absolutely right. Most police agencies do have policies that if they're called out to the scene for a domestic violence issue, somebody's going to get arrested. And in these types of situations, it's almost always a he said, she said situation. There's usually not any photos. Oftentimes there's not any injuries, because for assault family violence, all you need is what we call bodily injury, which means pain, whether that's pulling the hair, a slap that doesn't cause any sort of markings. And so it's one of the crimes that I see most often where my clients are falsely accused. The police will just determine, they're on the scene, who do they believe is more credible than the other person. Sometimes they go off of who called the police first, who's the one that has the injuries, who has the worst injuries, and then they just arrest that person. And so then it's up to attorneys like myself to then try to prove them innocent. Or set these cases for trial. And so, so you are absolutely right. We do have the police agencies that are, and it's very serious offense, obviously, but it's very, very easy to get wrapped up in a case like this. And my clients, they are most surprised that it doesn't take a whole lot of evidence to get arrested. All it takes in the state of Texas is one person's word against the other. You don't need photos. You don't need witnesses. You don't need video. One person says you did it, and the police believe them. Off to jail you go, ICE detainer, and possible removal. Anyways, so I'll pass this on to the others to get into the other questions regarding the sanctuary cities and what to do when or if ICE comes knocking.
And before they
Angel-
answer that, I'm going to say that not only does it just take one person to get arrested, the law in the state of Texas is that it only takes one person for a conviction. If you believe them beyond a reasonable doubt, that is enough. So, they don't call us Texas, who incarcerates more people than even a ton of small countries, for no reason. It is for this reason. It is very difficult to be a criminal defendant in the state of Texas. But go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yes, I just want to add to what Angel said about one person's word, and usually it's the word of the person who speaks the language, the person who speaks English. And a lot of these times when people are falsely accused or when victims, face getting arrested, they may not be able to speak English at all. They may be recently arrived immigrants, those who've been come here on K-1 visas. So that's very problematic to domestic violence victims. Another thing, if people that are falsely accused, or if you could go to jail and get a detainer, and you're subject to mandatory detention. What does that mean? Let's say you have a case you can fight in court, or some type of relief like VAWA or U visa. Those types of processes take 3 to 6 years. And so that person is going to have to be detained in an immigration detention center for over 3 to 6 years if it's mandatory. My question is, where is all the space? We don't have enough space as it is. And if we're firing immigration judges left and right, then that court hearing is going to take a long time. Right now, if you go to court, you get a final, if you go to immigration court, you can get a final hearing for some cases, 1 to 2 years. But in other courts, in other immigration courts, it could take up to 5 years from now just to get your final hearing. And so if you end up in jail and you have, and you may be subject to mandatory detention, that's the time where you need to get an attorney right away, where you need someone on the outside fighting your case. Me working at a nonprofit foundation, it's going to be hard for me to contact those people. It's going to be so hard for me to work up a VAWA case, to work up a U visa case when that person is behind bars. And so it's going to make our job a lot difficult. Attorney Kathleen?
Yeah, so your question about sanctuary cities, it's interesting, right? Because those are the cities who Trump is going after with the ICE raids right now. So sanctuary cities are cities where the government of that city refuses to utilize their resources and their money to help ICE do their job. And that's because immigration is federal. ICE works for the federal government. They don't work for the state or the city. So cities like Los Angeles, they're like, I'm not going to spend our own money to help you detain our residents. And so those are it's not like it per se protections. It's just that they're not going to make it worse for you, sort of. Now, the city of Los Angeles, they have proposed a lot of cool ordinances that will like even protect you even more, like at LAX. I don't know the future of that, but I mean, just I tell a lot of my clients, like, if you can afford it, not to live in a red state and to live in a state where you're protected by sanctuary policies, that's actually really important. Now, when it comes to your rights, yeah, so you have the right to remain silent. That's extremely important. But before ICE even comes to your house, don't answer the door. You don't have to answer the door, but if you do, you have to actually literally exercise that right to remain silent out loud verbally. You do not have to consent to a search of yourself or your belongings, but police can sort of pat down your clothing if they have suspicion of a weapon, right? If you're arrested by police, you have the right to a government appointed attorney. If you are detained by ICE, you have the right to consult with a lawyer, but the government is not required to provide one for you. So definitely call one. Now, it's a little bit different now that the Laken Riley Act is a thing, right? So if you give them reason or cause to detain you, they can immediately deport you if you're subject to ICE jurisdiction. So you have to be the bigger person. I tell my followers, my clients this all the time. You have to be calm. You can't give them reason to detain you. Right to remain silent, lawyer. Your vocabulary is very, very limited to silence and lawyer.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I want to be clear, these are good tips no matter what your status is. One of the things that I used to tell people all the time when I practiced criminal law was the most sacred right that you have is to shut up. So use it, right? I would tell people, especially the people that are innocent, they never really understand why they shouldn't talk. And I'd have to explain, they're not necessarily looking for a confession. They may just need you to admit to being in a certain space at a certain time. And they take that and they twist it. So just use your right to remain silent and use your right to an abogado. Now, as it relates to one more thing, and then I'm going to let Kendall ask questions before we get out of here. Attorney Martinez, you specifically talked about illegal entry into the United States. And I want to clarify for people because we've heard people on a certain side of the aisle say things like, oh, the illegals have invaded. They say things like illegal in the sense that someone broke a criminal law. I just want to clarify that if someone enters the country and they do not do so legally, is that criminal or not? And you've already laid out that that's federal and not state. So all this cowboy stuff that we get out of Greg Abbott, well, he doing too much because that's not his territory. And then I also want to clarify, there was one more thing about the entry. I forgot. I may remember as you answer that, but please clarify for us about the entry part.
Yeah, so entering illegally may be a federal crime, right? But being here unlawfully is not. It is a civil violation. Same thing as like a traffic citation, right? So when our friends on the other side of the aisle are claiming that illegal immigrants are criminals, they are not. Yeah, and a person cannot be illegal. Being illegal is akin to an action, and an action has to be akin to an actual crime, not just a crime that you admit make up on Facebook, right? So if you're here unlawfully, you're committing a civil violation. You are not a criminal. Not that they care for that definition, but it is very important because if 11 million undocumented immigrants were criminals, they would be in removal proceedings and they would have been deported by now by all these alleged ICE raids, right? And they're not. I mean, you can't realistically go after 11 million undocumented immigrants because they are not criminals. They're committing civil violations, which U.S. citizens do every day. So, I mean, I think to the rhetoric that illegal immigrants are criminals, so many undocumented immigrants come here on a visa. They come here legally. So they're all about like, enter legally, right? They do enter legally. And a lot of the times they lose status. Like, for example, Trump has taken away parole and TPS and legal status for hundreds of thousands of people who are currently here legally.
Temporary protected status. Go ahead.
Yes, parole, temporary protected status, who all came here legally under Biden. They did it legally, right? Now they are undocumented. They are not a criminal because Trump took away their status. They are just committing a civil violation by remaining here because he took it away from them. Clearly, it's not about legal immigration, obviously.
No, it's not. And I do want to be clear because I know you know the answer to this as well. As we talk about these undocumented folk, because I want people to start to get their language together. If someone is undocumented, does it mean that they are just living off the land and they are just dependent upon the federal government? Or have you found that undocumented people actually pay taxes?
Oh, undocumented immigrants pay taxes. All my clients ever want to do when they hire me is find a way to work. And they will, whether they can or not, and they will always file and pay taxes. I think what you found in your hearing, Jasmine's like, what, 100
100
million?
billion.
100 billion in taxes. And it was like, I think in 2022, the IRS reported like 96 billion paid in taxes by undocumented immigrants. And then my next comment I always get in social media, but the less intelligent is, how do they do that? They don't have documentation. They don't have a social. You can get an ITIN number. That is a tax filing number that you can pay taxes with. So you don't need to be legal to pay taxes. And they do that because they enjoy the privilege of being here. They have earned it and they're continuing to earn it. They appreciate it more than people who didn't have to earn it. They want to be here legally. They want to pay taxes.
Last thing that I'm going to ask, and then I'm kicking it over to Kendall, I promise. I remember what my question was. It was about asylum. And so you talk about how people enter the country. And a lot of times all we do is hear about the border, the border, the border. And they act like we only have one border and we have multiple borders. But nevertheless, I want to be clear. Are you aware of what federal law says about where it is that you can present yourself if you're seeking asylum?
Yeah, I mean, you can present yourself at the border. That's where you're applying for legal entry into the country so that you can apply for asylum. So when Trump took away that ability to do that, he shut down the app that schedules the appointments to do that, and he also shut down the border. He prevented legal entry. People were not flooding the border to come here illegally, or they would have done that. They're flooding the border to apply for legal entry into the United States to seek asylum.
So, Attorney Martinez, I'm going to hop in because I believe that the Congresswoman is frozen, but I'm going to go ahead and go to one of our questions. So one of our questions, it says, what should someone do if they get picked up by ICE on the street and have no status? This has been happening in my city. Is it true? Is it true that people at risk should have a G-28 ready?
Yeah, I mean, a G-28 or your retainer with your lawyer, if you have one. Also, a receipt notice from any application that you filed. If you do have some kind of documentation, like you have DACA or TPS, work permit, any of that to show ICE that you are in the process of obtaining a green card, the better.
Okay, thank you for that. Our next question we have, is there a way to clarify a date of entry with USCIS after a fraudulent attorney changed their date of entry? Sorry.
I
I don't
can
know if
answer that one.
anybody else wants to answer that. Go ahead,
Yeah.
attorney.
Yes. So I've encountered that several times with a lot of especially DACA clients, where they don't remember their date of entry because they were babies at that time, right? Or young children. And so they go back and, and they ask their family, and one family member thinks it's one thing, but then later on, when we're renewing their DACA, maybe 10 years later or so, they actually correct it. So there is a way. So when you're doing an application, you change the date and then you just write a notice. You can write a statement or additional information on the application and just give them the reason why that you thought, you entrusted someone else to do your application correctly. They wrote incorrect information and you'd like to make the correction now. But again, this is not advice. I do recommend you to speak to an attorney. And if you're trying to get some benefit by, messing with the numbers, you really have to have evidence to show that you actually entered on or around that date.
Thank you so much. On that same note of DACA, we did have a question just specifically around what advice or how should DACA recipients prepare for possible policy changes or the potential threat of the program ending?
So, I mean, if you've DACA, I mean, it's been tied up in litigation for a while, but if you have the ability to get a green card some other way, U visa, T visa, a family member, definitely take advantage of it and seek a consultation with an immigration attorney.
And I would also add to that, Kendall, that some of the DACA clients that I've encountered, they actually would a lot of them want to travel on advanced parole so that they can get that legal admission to adjust status. I think this is another opportunity at this time to talk to your family again, because what I found is that some DACA clients actually are able to adjust status through something called 245I. That means that their parents had a petition filed before the law changed, before 2001. So if they weren't able to do advanced parole or are thinking about it now, definitely speak to a lawyer now to see under what grounds you could travel to get that legal admission, or talk to an attorney, talk to your family, go through your family history and ask your parents if there's any chance that you were part of a petition before 2001.
Thank you for that. Another question that we received is how can I help my daughter who wants to stand up for her friends at school that's being harassed by ICE? She comes home crying a lot because they have scared her friends and she really wants to help. Is ICE allowed to come into school and raid, essentially?
I mean, they're allowed to because of this crazy policy. So, I mean, they've always been allowed to, but before they had to require like upper management, I guess, like approval before going into sensitive areas like schools, hospitals, places of worship. Now they don't necessarily need to. I'm not seeing reports that they're actually doing that. I don't know, Attorney Christina, if and Attorney Mata, if y'all are seeing that. I have not heard that with my followers or my clients yet that they're going into schools though.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in the DFW area, and I think a lot of school districts have put out disclaimers either through emails or on their websites indicating that if ICE were to show up, that they need to have a warrant. They aren't just going to let them in and run amok throughout the schools. They need to have a warrant in order to come in because there are privacy laws in regards to the students.
Yes, and another thing, ICE usually won't come and and enforce any warrant that they might have to detain someone at an elementary school, because that's there's young children there, and usually young children's cases, if they're in removal proceedings, they're attached to the parent's case. So they will usually come, if they're going to come after the family, they're going to come after the parents first, if that happens. And in discussing with other attorneys, what we've thought, if it does happen, where it would happen would be probably in the high school, and they're looking for one particular juvenile that has, an arrest warrant, has a criminal issue already, is involved in some criminal case against him. So that's probably where you would see ICE. We haven't heard of anything in the DFW area. And are there raids in elementary school? I highly doubt we would see that in a school with young children. Those would mostly happen in the workplace. So we don't really, at this moment, we think that's a low risk.
I will add to this that obviously there was a child that committed suicide because of the harassment that was taking place at her school. And I, first of all, just want to say I applaud your daughter. because these are the type of children we hope will grow into the meaningful leaders of our country going forward. People that are compassionate and loving and want to help other people. If anything, I would say just kind of raising the awareness as it relates to bullying. So, as the attorneys have laid out, this isn't really a thing that we should see. There has been a concern that if ICE shows up at schools, they're going to show up for the purpose of actually trying to go after the parents. And so we know that there were parents that had not been necessarily taking their kids to school and things like that. I did file a bill so that we can make it. Sorry, y'all, I'm having so many phone issues. I did file a bill so that we could actually make it law. Now, I don't anticipate that it's going to go anywhere, but as Attorney Martinez laid out, there had been basically an executive order under the Biden-Harris administration about sensitive locations, that's hospitals, schools, as well as religious institutions. I did file a bill to protect those officially in law. Maybe that is something that we will get at some point in time. I don't think we will get it under this administration, but looking forward and looking at how we do immigration and kind of what makes sense and what doesn't, that is something that we just need to go ahead and codify and write into law. I will tell your daughter, thank you for being brave. But make sure that we are informing the teachers about any bullying that we see. And it may be good for her to start a group with other like-minded students who don't agree with bullying anybody, so that if there are students that are being bullied, that they can feel like they have a place to go and they don't feel so alone. Because I imagine the young lady that committed suicide felt like she was all alone. She told the people that should have gone out and then protected her, and they didn't. But your daughter literally may be able to save another child's life by showing another child that may be subjected to bullying that there are people, even her peers, that are there for her or him.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The next question that we have is, with everything going on, what steps should one take if a green card is about to expire, but they work for a U.S.-based company?
Well, I mean, I think if you have a pathway to citizenship through a visa through a U.S. like company, then you should work with the in-house counsel for that. But I think if your green card is about to expire, then you need to renew it. Right? So, or find a way to naturalize. Kind of unrelated, but what I see a lot, and I'm sure every attorney here does see, is a lot of parents and older people have green cards for a little bit too long and they don't naturalize. And now what we're also seeing is recently green card holders are getting detained at the border and they have residence. I mean, they've already earned their ability to stay here. And so you're just never off immigration's radar until you become a citizen. So if you're able to naturalize, definitely take advantage of it.
Perfect. One of our other questions that we received is, what should someone do, or what is your advice if ICE comes to their home?
Yeah, I think Attorney Martinez covered this. But if you want to go ahead and recap kind of the basics, or I can, either way. If you know, these kind of are almost general rules, right? You don't have to open the door. In fact, you shouldn't open the door. As well as if for some reason somebody else opens the door, then definitely there needs to be an inquiry about whether or not there's a warrant. That needs to be the first thing. And then the second thing kind of needs to be right to remain silent. And I would say the next thing would be lawyer. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but kind of in that order.
And I would say not to be intimidated. We have seen what happened in Aurora, Colorado. We've seen a lot of those videos where ICE is just pounding and pounding and pounding at the door. I don't know the exact circumstances, if they had any warrants, but that can be very intimidating. And if they're saying, hey, you better open the door, I'm going to break it down, and they did, in fact, break it down, then you have to make, the right decision, but still demand to see that warrant. If they are looking for someone in the house and you know that person is there, and you know someone in your family has a criminal issue or has been arrested for a violent crime before, y'all need to sit down and have a talk. And it's probably risky for that person to be there, living there with a lot of other undocumented family members. And that's called, ICE can pick up what they see, like the collateral. We call it collateral people, right? They're coming for one person, but everyone else is so terrified that they just, instead of, we need to shut up, instead of closing our mouths, we're like, well, yeah, I don't have any papers, or I'm from here and this is my name. And your name's not on that warrant. There's no reason why you have to talk to them. They don't need to know, they don't need to know where you're from. They don't need to know anything about you. Your name, that's fine. Your date of birth, that's fine. They don't need to know anything else because they're not there for you. So I would suggest that if you know someone in your family has, has some type of removal order or has some type of criminal issue, you need to make a safety plan. You need to talk. Where is everyone going to live? What are we going to do about our children? Now is that time to see if you're at risk. But I don't think just, the regular, an undocumented person without a criminal history or no prior removal orders, I don't think ICE is going to be knocking down those doors. Not that it won't ever happen, but I think that's a low risk. So people that are high risk, you got to determine, is my household high risk? And then you have to start making plans about what to do.
Christy, I'm going to jump in real quick. I know I just do criminal law, but is there a difference in the types of warrants? From my understanding, there's a judicial warrant and then there's an administrative warrant. It's a judicial warrant that they're looking out for, right? Is that correct?
Yes, and in immigration law, the orders or the removal orders look a little bit different. You might have an order to someone might get a removal order, or that's a deportation order, and it will be signed by a judge, but it's not a warrant for arrest of that person. So I would still demand, even though it's signed by a judge, you got to make sure that word is there, warrant for arrest of alien, and not just an order signed by a judge.
Yep. Okay, Kendall, what else you got for us?
So we have a question. Can a U.S. citizen, let me rephrase this, can a spouse or child that's a U.S. citizen help prevent the deportation of a family member who is an immigrant?
Well, I mean, if you're
You're
a family
fine.
member,
But go ahead.
sorry. If you're, I mean, if you're a family member in removal proceedings, then what you could do is you could try to file a green card application for them. So if you have a family member who's eligible to petition for them, you can try to get the case dismissed. And if you get it dismissed, I mean, obviously you're not in removal proceedings, so definitely consult an immigration attorney about that.
But definitely, I would say if you're thinking about physically getting involved because they show up at the door and you know that you're a citizen, do not interfere. So you don't want to end up catching your own case for interference in any way, especially if they already have a warrant. So when you say prevent, I would say don't get physically engaged in any way. But again, talk to a lawyer if you've got any questions. But I would think long and hard before potentially catching the case.
And Congresswoman, we're coming up on time, but there is just a question, a general question, which I think may be good as a closer for everyone. But as a reminder, what are the most important things that people should remember if they are stopped by ICE?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I would say that it's really important in the land of Trump, in the time of Trump, that everyone, whether you are documented, whether you are a full-blown citizen, whether you are undocumented, whoever you are, make sure that you have whatever documentation you can provide, because we have seen that ICE has made mistakes. They have actually picked up people that are actual citizens. So unfortunately, we are living during the times of show me your papers. So please, 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 even if you don't physically have certain copies on you, always make sure that you have something on your phone. Like just do your best to be able to prove that you are who you say you are, especially if you are rightfully here in this country. And that's not to say that if you're undocumented, you're not rightfully here. Say legally. Let me just say legal. That sounded bad. Okay, go ahead.
No, so from a criminal perspective, what we're seeing is immigrants having encounters with the police, and then ICE becoming involved through the ICE hold and everything. And so to go over a little bit about those rights, when you encounter the police, you have the app, and we've said this time and again throughout this this Zoom, is you have the right to remain silent. You have the absolute right to remain silent. And it's really hard, I think, for some people to say that. Well, can I have an attorney? Again, if you're arrested, you have the right to an attorney, and one can be appointed to you if you can't afford one. And the other right we have is we have a right against unreasonable searches and seizures. So what does that mean? You have the right to say no if the police ask you to search your vehicle, to search your home, search your phone or your person, like to get into your pockets. And so we have that right against unreasonable searches and seizures. And so if they ask you these questions, ask them for a warrant. And so so my part is just encountering the police that then lead to ICE encounters.
I think if like I can add anything, I think it would be, sorry, can you guys hear me? I don't know if it's okay, good.
Yes.
If I can add honestly anything, it would be just to know your rights. But the ILRC is an organization who and they are so informative. The amount of information is unbelievable on their website, but they have know your rights cards. They're like called red cards. You can go on their website and you can print it. Definitely carry them on you at all times if you ever get detained by ICE.
And I did see some questions, Jasmine, about what other organizations are out there. Attorney Martinez mentioned the ILRC, which you can Google that, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. You could also look up a lot of resources on ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, and for Texas specific toolkits and information. You can look at the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. They do have a lot of information there, or the Texas Immigration Council. And also try to connect with the nonprofits, different organizations locally. We will have, I know I work with the Mexican American Bar Association, and we have a lot of upcoming events together with local nonprofits. We will be posting those in a few days. You can find that at dallasmaba.com. And also, if anyone needs assistance with a VAWA or U visa, we are able to take those cases pro bono. You could contact me at tmwf.org.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I hope that if you had an opportunity to tune in, that you recognize how amazing these women are. And again, it's women on the front lines of everything in this country, but that's okay. That's okay. We done saved it before. We gonna keep saving it, unfortunately, because we do have these big hearts and we care so deeply, regardless of how many people spit in our face, talk bad about us, and say that we are incapable. As you found out today, they are beyond capable. They are amazingly intelligent, and they are fiercely fierce warriors. And so I hope you learned something. Just know, again, this disclaimer goes around one more time, that nothing that myself nor any of the attorneys said during this hour-long presentation should be taken as legal advice. If you have issues, legal issues, then we urge you to consult with an attorney, especially in your state, because all of us are Texas lawyers. And so we've talked a lot about what goes on in Texas, but the combination of what goes on in the state of Texas versus another state and the interplay with the federal law. And as it's been laid out, federal law is consistently changing. So it's so important that you make sure that you contact an attorney if you have questions. no matter what they are. But remember, you do have rights. So don't let anyone tell you because you are undocumented or because you know someone who is undocumented, don't ever let them make you believe that that person who is undocumented lacks rights. We all have rights while we're on this soil, at least for now. So with that, God bless each and every one of you that was able to tune in. And please, please, please always know that you can visit pocket.house.gov if you need anything from our office. Good night, Texas.